Hello, everyone. Welcome to the BPRC Virtual Industry Breakfast. My name is Rob Nickel. I will be hosting today's event, and I'll be introducing our guest speaker in just a minute. I just want to give another minute or two for everyone to join. I think we're looking okay, so let's just begin this event. So again, thanks for joining. I'm Rob Nickel. This is the Industry Breakfast. It is in collaboration with Medisun, and we have a great guest speaker today, Jantina Enright. BPRC is the Bioindustrial Process Research Center at Lambton College. There are different research centers at Lambton, but the bio-based one deals with all sorts of things related to bio, including cannabis. So we are part of the Research and Innovation Department at Lambton College. For BPRC, we offer three core areas of focus that we work on. It's applied research projects, innovation technical services, and specialized training services. So applied research projects, if you're a private sector partner, maybe you need help bringing a new product or process to market, we can help with that in terms of proof of concept, validation, technical analysis using all of the great equipment we have in our lab. We also provide other services like market analysis, business plan development, and we can do some specialized training. So today we're talking about cannabis. A good example of cannabis training might be leveraging BPRC's great infrastructure, liquid chromatography, gas chromatography, ion chromatography, and botanical extraction equipment, leveraging that equipment to train clients in the cannabis space in terms of extracting and analyzing cannabinoids. So very well equipped to help on all sorts of research projects and technical services and other things. So please, if you think there's any way that we could help you, please reach out to myself or Martha could put you in contact with me as well. Martha helped do this event today, so thanks very much. So today we're talking about cannabis, working in the cannabis sector. What does it take? Jantina Enright is a production manager at Medisun Incorporated. Jantina is a production manager at Medisun, just said that. Having worked in the cannabis industry for over 3 years, she has a passion for cannabis production and wants to remove the stigma and build a safe and high quality product for patients and recreational users. She is committed to putting forth the time and effort it takes to achieve this, knowing that cannabis as an industry is still in its infancy stages. So thanks very much for joining today. And I'll pass it over to Jantina in 1 minute. So a little bit more about Medisun. Medisun is one of Canada's top licensed cannabis cultivators with a proven legacy in agricultural and state-of-the-art technologies. They offer a trusted source of consistently produced high-quality cannabis with quantity, potency, and strains that their clients need. The scale they produce can be matched by very few in the industry worldwide. So that's Medisun, and that's Jantina. So Jantina, thanks so much for joining us today, and I'll pass it over to you if you're ready to start.
Great. Thanks, Rob, for having me. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. So I will just do a short presentation here in time for Q&A. Like Rob said, a little bit of background from myself. I've been working in cannabis for just over 3 years now. I started with Tilray, working for its recreational market for High Park Farms. That was based out of Petrolia. Through mergers that went through with Afria, that site had closed and I've moved on to working with Medisun Inc. So I've been here since September and very excited to be part of this team. They are doing great things. Like Rob said, comparable to very little in the industry as a whole in the business platform that they've taken. So I'll kind of walk through that a little bit. I want to focus a little bit on what it takes to work in cannabis. I think even, somebody for myself that came from a different background before going into this industry, sometimes there can be a little bit of misconceived notions and things like that. But the industry in itself is, in my experience, and I do have a lot of passion for being here and working here, something to share with everybody. So I'll get started. I'm sharing my screen here. Just let me know if you can see my screen. Okay,
Yep,
so
looks good.
Medisun, perfect. Medisun, I'll talk about them as a primary focus, and working in cannabis, what does it take? So Medisun Inc. is located in Grand Point, Ontario. That's very close to Chatham. And was established as Medisun in 2018 when cannabis became legal in Canada. So they were given their licensing in 2018 and started their first crops in April of the following year. There's a lot of work that goes into, so this greenhouse that we're at here is 13 acres, and it was retrofitted as it was a pepper farm prior. So that kind of retrofitting after your licensing and things you need with Health Canada took some time, and they did have their first crops in April of 2019. So like I said, it's a 13-acre greenhouse. It's a hybrid greenhouse. There's poly side and a glass side, and there's also the post-production downstream, which is what I'm currently managing right now for the the downstream part of it. So packaging, sorting, trimming, things like that, getting it ready to send to customer and shipping. Medisun's focus is wholesale distribution, and I think that that's what really sets us apart. So when cannabis first came legalized in Canada, there was a lot of cannabis companies and LPs looking to get licensing and opening, and it was a very exciting time and an industry that wasn't there. And so you saw a lot of LPs opening. And what we've seen is, if people that follow the industry or work in the industry, you've seen a lot of larger companies that are merging, acquiring, or purchasing out other LPs. And so there's kind of a shift. And one of the things that Medisun focuses on is wholesale distribution. So they're not selling to their own retail channels and competing in that market. They're wholesale distribution to other LPs and being able to fulfill the gaps, because they do have a wonderful greenhouse that's able to produce on that commercial level where others don't have that type of infrastructure, because it is expensive to acquire, it's expensive to maintain, and it comes with a whole bunch of challenges, as working in agriculture does. And cannabis is very finicky and does require a lot of attention. And working in Health Canada and those types of standards, there's all of those too. So Medisun has been able to find that they can focus on the growing and the high quality of the cannabis, and not at this time right now working on a retail stream and filling that distribution. And for me, I've been able to see kind of both sides, and I think that since I've come here, that's that shift that I see, and it really does set them apart from what's happening in other LPs. So just going to go through Medisun's organizational pillars a little bit. I think it's really important, and it kind of sets the foundation of who they are and what we do here. And so safety is always first. It needs to be first. It's safety of your people, safety of your product, and ensuring that you're kind of always growing and moving forward and making sure that everything you do, safety is first, top of mind. Teamwork. So teamwork is just working in constant collaboration. Cannabis is very new, and not a lot of things are known. So you're still building fundamental points of that business, and you're still, feeling like you're sometimes a little bit lost in what you're doing. And when you have a team behind you, you bring everybody together. And that is an everyday part of your job when you work in cannabis, is constantly working in collaboration with your team, learning from people with different ideas or different experience, even from another industry. And that's how you really start to make headway. And I think that is when you find that team and you find that collaboration, you start to see the business evolve and develop, and it's very exciting time. So I will say here that Medisun really focuses on teamwork. And that kind of loops into respect. So respecting each other, respecting where people's background came from, listening to ideas, being open-minded to change, and to trying something maybe you haven't done before. And then quality of product is top of mind. This is, and will always be the focus, is that you're sending the best and safest quality of product to your customers, to patients, to whatever market you're fulfilling. Is that through every stage of what you do, you are constantly staying, of course, in compliance with Health Canada, any other regulatory bodies you're dealing with, and ensuring that through every step, which there are many, that quality is top of mind, and that's what goes out the door, that you don't let products leave unless you would be happy to receive this product as a consumer, as a patient. And Medisun has a big focus, and that's why they've stayed in wholesale distribution for a while, is to make sure, because they've been able to do that well, is stay in quality of plant. So some exciting news that happened recently in the new year is a merger that Medisun has gone through with an Australian-based company called Canon. So this was just announced that Medisun and Canon Group merged to create one of the largest cannabis companies globally. So Canon is based out of Australia, and they are a GMP medical facility only, with sites in Jamaica and Australia. So the merger will work in a way that Medisun can now fulfill both a recreational market in Canada, and also send flower overseas to be distributed to the medical market through further processing at the GMP site in Australia. And from that point, go into other EU markets for medical, which you see more and more a shift as people are understanding the research and the science behind cannabis as medicine. Other markets are opening up, and it's a very exciting time in the industry to be part of, because we're seeing through studies in different hospitals and research that this is something that can be used recreationally, but also medicinally. And together through this, they'll be able to fulfill both markets, like I said, and bring the highest quality cannabis and products to consumers and patients. And that's really the goal of Medisun and Canon, is to produce always the highest quality product and fill those markets. So kind of touched on it a little bit, but Canon Group was established in 2017, and their goal is to produce medical grade cannabis and show that it is real medicine, to remove that stigma, to legitimize and ensure that all patients are receiving something that's life-changing and able to help them in whatever ailment that is that they're facing. And you know, if you do research online or talk to other companies, or as I've been in this industry, able to talk to just people in your everyday life, and you find examples of how cannabis is used more and more as medicine and what that's doing for people, it's pretty exciting. And for me, I'm really proud to be part of a business that's working towards that. So for Canon, they cultivate in Jamaica and Australia. They do have their Australian site is EU GMP distribution, so channels there, and they also focus on educational partnerships all over the world, again, continuing to build research into medical cannabis. For cultivation, they do greenhouses, they do hoop houses, and they also have outdoor grows. Okay, so I'll focus kind of on just working in cannabis and my experiences, what challenges you face, but also what has brought the passion for me and the excitement and the eagerness to continue to want to work and grow in this industry. So like I had said earlier, this industry, cannabis, is very much still in its infancy. If you compare this to food or pharma or alcohol and tobacco industries, they have been around for so much longer that they have developed standardized practices and something that is set in stone, and it doesn't work like a startup, where cannabis really is. It has been legalized since 2018, but in the grand scheme of things, as an industry, that's not a lot of time. And the market in cannabis is something that still shifts constantly. What they're looking for, as the market knows and grows themselves, creates that shift. And whether it's potency, terpene profiling, specific strains, and various things. And because of that, and while the market is still shifting, that is what keeps the industry kind of constantly changing. So one of those things is it does create a lot of opportunity for creativity, development, and exciting opportunities. So if you're somebody that likes to work in something that is, you don't exactly know what you're going into every day or what the outcome is going to be, and you want that creative input, cannabis is a lot like that. There's development of SOPs, there's growing strategies and various things that are constantly being looked at. There's a lot of research and development opportunities, and not to mention just types of cannabis products that you'll see through legalization in Canada are coming out, whether it's the things that have happened, the vapes, the edibles, the beverages, the flower. It's just, it grows and grows, topicals, things like that. So there's a lot of opportunity for development because it is still changing so much. So with that, and kind of going to the flip side, is that with new industries, with new startup businesses, bring a lot of challenges, a lot of constant change and roadblocks. So I will say that cannabis isn't necessarily for everybody as an industry because of the constant change. So that is something that can, as you're trying to work on a project or you're building something and you feel that you're finishing all of that hard work and then you realize that something has shifted and it's going to what seems like take a step back. That's kind of a constant in cannabis. It's a constant evolvement. Somebody is, coming across something that's different, or you didn't get the potency that you needed, that you were expecting, and you really need to shift and pivot very quickly. Or, like I said, the market shift. So the market shift is probably the biggest thing because obviously with cannabis, it's plants, and that plant life is something that can't be switched on and off like a lot of manufacturing of alcohol or food, where you can just quickly change, clean machines, and put in a new recipe. Plants take 6-9 months, and you have to cultivate and bring that through. And so those shifts create a lot of challenges if they change partway through because you can't pivot as quickly. There are ways, and cannabis has done a lot in being able to come up with how do we reach that market the fastest, how do we get ahead of it, how do we predict trends and things like that. And as cannabis is growing, we're starting to actually get data that is trackable and trendable. But really up until now and still happening, you'll see a constant shift in that market. So even sales and research is seeing that they can't do a lot of predictions as to what they're going to want in 6 months from now. And cannabis does have a shelf life, so that's something to also understand, that it to maintain the integrity, you want to be selling your highest quality plant, and therefore you don't want to be selling older products. You want to be always distributing and growing something that is new and ready to hit the shelves. So compliance and regulations, this is something that unless you've worked in an area with high regulations or compliance with other regulatory bodies, it's easy to overlook. So working with Health Canada and under the Cannabis Act and following those regulations can create roadblocks to keep people safe, to keep product able to be saleable, reporting your numbers to the CRA. So I will say that in my experience, one of the biggest hurdles, which you don't always expect, is paperwork, is making sure that what's happening on the floor is 100% tracked in your paperwork and how you go back. And I think that this is an area that people are still constantly working on improving and figuring out why this challenge is there. I have worked in other LPs. I've spoken to a lot of other people that do, and paperwork seems to be a constant thing, but it is really fundamentally, besides quality and in collaboration, because they're one, is the most important thing. To sell your flower, to release all that hard work that went into cultivation and manufacturing, you need to have that excellent paperwork, and we need people in our quality departments and on the floor working together. So that's one of them. And being prepared and collaborative with Health Canada is a big part of working in cannabis. And understanding the changes and staying relevant and constant communication and openness is really important in this industry. So changing the stigma, pioneering the future of cannabis for the adult recreation market in medicine. So kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but because cannabis is new, I still find that there's some, it kind of is on one side of the spectrum or the other. People are very excited, very happy when they know you work in cannabis, and they're so intrigued, or they have an experience that they've had personally that's changed their life, or someone that they love, or they question how I have 2 small children, so how do you work in this industry, and how do you share this with your family, and is this the right place to be? And you kind of see that shift. So for me, that's really important to me. I think personally that cannabis is medicine, that it can change the way that pharmaceuticals are used for certain ailments and really help people that are struggling in certain areas where pharmaceuticals may not be the best fit for them. And it can also help. So I'll give some personal examples. My mother has Parkinson's disease, and she's really focused in holistic health and healing. She's a massage therapist, and so it was really important to her with her diagnosis that she was able to find something that aligned with what felt right for her to use. And so she does have a medical prescription for cannabis, and it completely changes her life. It gives her, reduces the tremors, allows for muscle relaxation. It helps with mental health and clarity when dealing with a life-changing diagnosis, and it has completely changed her life. So another one is I've had a friend who has had chronic illnesses, and associated with that is a lot of pain. And so for years she was on a lot of pain medication and working through chronic illnesses that she will have forever. And what had happened was, because of the constant need for pain medication, her doctors had came to her because her kidneys were struggling because of the amount of pain medication she needed. And so working with her doctor, she was able to try to introduce cannabis as a pain reliever, and it has changed her life. And she's been able to reduce pain medication by 75% with the use of cannabis through her doctors, and her kidneys are functioning at 100%, and she's not at risk of dialysis anymore. So these are just some close to my heart ones that really for me are part of why I love being in cannabis and why I love seeing the work that these teams are doing every day, and reading about the industry and growing with it, and understanding too that as a recreational market, that this is an exciting time for Canadians, as we've been able to be one of the first ones to have this as part of the recreational market, and what that means for a lot of people, and understanding that we are laying the groundwork for other countries that will open themselves to a recreational market when they see that it can be sustainable and managed just like other controlled substances like alcohol, and that it can be part of that with responsibility of use and building that. So there's both, and there's benefits to both. And something personally that I've also experienced, and for those of you that work in cannabis, I'm sure you've had very similar experiences, but the people make the business. So when I made the shift to working into the cannabis industry, I have met some of the most brilliant and dedicated people I've ever worked with. This is something where, when you're sending emails at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock on a Friday night, everybody's responding, because that drive is still there. And like I had said earlier, it takes a lot of hard work and a lot of focus and dedication in the industry, because you're constantly growing and because it's changing so fast. And so for me, my experiences have been meeting teams of people on that exact same mindset and putting the exact same amount of work as you, where you feel that every step you take is that constant shift together. And that doesn't happen in my own experience in every industry, but in cannabis and everything I've seen is I have met some of the most dedicated people, and you see people from all walks of life. You're getting people that came from an engineering background or finance or a pharma, agriculture, but somehow all point to that same drive of building this industry, making better product, delivering and growing the best that you can. And that requires a lot of dedication, because there are tough times and a lot of hurdles that come working in cannabis. But for me, the people that I've met and the opportunities that I've had and the learning for myself and my own development has been huge, and very grateful for that. So that's a little bit on working in cannabis for me, just to kind of touch on what I think are the main points that I've come across. And that's it for me. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Santina. Do we have any questions from the audience? I guess maybe I have one to, oh, we have one already. Okay, Kuzai. Kuzai's asking, and I just had it, and where did it go? Show conversation. What are the challenges that the cannabis industry have in production and downstream processing? Is a question.
Sure. So some of those, like I said, so one is paperwork. That is a main challenge, is keeping your paperwork constant and clear, and always following those SOPs. The other one that you're dealing with too is, much like a lot of other manufacturing, is dealing with equipment failures, making sure you're using compliant and proper equipment for cannabis, because not everything's been researched or it hasn't been used. So you want to make sure you're maintaining the integrity of that. So that's one that you face. Much like everybody else with COVID and things that have happened, is ensuring you have the staffing that you need and the right people in place to run that. But those would be a couple that you see. And like I said, so sometimes depending on the channel and you need to hit certain benchmarks. So this much potency for this retail strain and that. And so if you are cultivating and predicting something's going to happen, cannabis is not as predictable as we would like it to be all of the time. And so you can hit a roadblock where you've expected a certain potency that you've grown over and over, and for some reason, which a lot of research is going into, whether it's sampling or what's happened, you may miss that potency even if it's by 0.5. And so now you have to make a quick shift into what you're going to do, so you still hit and fulfill your demand.
Right. That actually brings up some questions for me on the research side, but I will leave them for now because we're getting other questions. But just a follow-up on the paperwork, you mentioned that as a challenge. Any idea? Rough is fine. Could you give us, how much effort generally do you think is spent in that compliance and paperwork? I'm wondering because, we have micro growers here, and a lot of smaller ones starting out are 2 or 3 people operations. Any guidance there on how much time, is really spent on those aspects?
So at the level that I've worked in, which is a commercial level, the quality side and the paperwork and compliance side is a little bit less than the labor side. You have more labor, but you are dedicated. So I have in my department for post-production right now, 2 people full-time dedicated just to auditing and releasing paperwork. Not to mention what's happening on the floor with supervisors and leads that are filling that out all day long. And then myself, who's overseeing that and helping with any issues that you run into. Because cannabis is working really quickly, and that's the thing about paperwork, is training is essential, because you have to be able, with Health Canada, to show your story of what happened. And you have to be able to say, this is what I did at every single step, and follow through with that. You can't have gaps in what happened in production or cultivation when it comes to numbers or it comes to every process. So if something is forgotten or missed or wrong, if you don't catch that as it's happening, and that's kind of where the challenge sits, going back is going to take a lot of work to go back. So it does have a high demand. So for micro growers and things like that, learning the paperwork and working with Health Canada and building proper SOPs and batch records is essential. That's the foundation of what you need to do.
Great. Okay, thanks. That's very useful. Thank you very much. Here's a question. Are there any processes to help constantly monitor diseases that these plants face during production? So I'm guessing they're asking about maybe new ideas, new tech, because I know diseases can be a problem with lots of crops. Anything new on the horizon there?
So that's an area that's constantly researched, because with cannabis being newer in a commercial side, they've seen things that are even specific. So I'll give an example of, they now have an aphid as a pest that's a cannabis aphid, and they didn't realize that they had that before. This is specific. They're seeing it in cannabis. It spreads really quickly. But the research that's going into that is being able to use Health Canada approved sprays, which is very limited, using a lot of labor to be able to physically remove them, scout for them. That's an example of one. Testing and working with your labs so that you're kind of seeing ahead of time and trending. You will find, or at least in my experience, that certain strains are more susceptible to diseases, and that's going to come from from your mother stock and understanding how to reset and then eliminate that, but also knowing your strains and the environment you're growing in. Greenhouses and outdoor grows and those types of things that are depending on a natural environment that aren't enclosed do face a lot more challenges because they don't have the same controls that indoor grows or greenhouses with those types of systems put in, where you can control temperature and humidity and various things a lot better. So there is a lot of research that's still going on. I would say it's still very much in the monitoring and testing phase, and also where finances are available, putting in environmental controls, because that seems to be one of the biggest challenges.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks for that. Here's a question on growth strategy. Are import-export restrictions a big challenge? Also, do you see bioharvesting of trichomes and bioreactors as a threat to growers for value-added products in big pharma? So I think there's two questions there, and these are great. Yeah, it'd be great to know about more about the import-export landscape. That growing in Jamaica kind of intrigued me, and will that product ever end up in Canada? I'm not sure. And then also, I think the second part is bioreactors. I'm guessing it's more along the line of synthetic cannabinoids, not necessarily from a plant. Growing it in a reactor. Is there a threat to the traditional plant on that aspect?
So for import export, so there are there's challenges to that because every country. So if you're working in Canada and you're selling to a recreational market, you can work under a GPP standard, regulated by Health Canada. But when you work into medical, it's a shift and it's a GMP, which the standardization is very different. And additionally, every country will have their own set standards that you must comply with. So that's something that if you are a Canadian manufacturer or greenhouse and you're looking to ship internationally, you have to have somebody in the compliance side that understands exactly what all those stipulations are. As an example, one that has and can easily be overseen is Canada. I'll revert back to spraying in the greenhouse with your foliar application. So Canada has Health Canada has a list of what's allowable, what that is, what's into that, and what they'll test for. So you can use that list. But if you go into Germany or into a different country, then you can see that they have a different list of what they need. And so understanding that does create hurdles, and it does mean that you have to spend extra attention. The cost to ship is something you have to consider as well, and knowing what that is and working with those distribution channels. For the other question, so I'm not overly involved so much in that. A little bit of research that I've done. I will say that I think there's the market itself is kind of shifting and changing all of the time, and those threats of where the development is going are real and they could happen. But at the same time, at least where we are, you can't do a lot of synthetic introductions of things into cannabis right now with how Health Canada is, and especially on the pharmaceutical, but both recreational side. So I don't have a ton of knowledge in that area. It's not my focus or where I spend the research right now. So I may not be the best to answer this question, but I think that yes, it could be something that's looked into the future, but I don't believe it would replace cultivation of cannabis for its uses. It could just shift what's being used for cannabis products, vapes, distillates, things like that.
Great. Okay. Yeah, no, thanks very much. Yeah, and it's tough to say. I think it, just like food production, people always want natural and organic and all these, attributes. So that's my opinion. I think the plant, there'll always be a big place for that plant as is. Thanks so much. So how challenging is it to predict local and international growth in this new market that has many different regulations around the world? So you were saying a lot about trends and trying to predict those, and the consumers are fickle. So I guess maybe a little more comment on that, and what does that mean locally and internationally, and especially within the context of different countries are doing different things and it's changing all the time.
Yeah, so my my main experience that I have is working in adult recreation. That was the focus that I had and still do here as well, but also now with the Canon merger, working in familiarizing myself with those GMP standards. So I would say that the challenges are, like I said, so the market is still learning what they want. And as we learn about cannabis, that shifts what the consumer is after. So for a while there was, you saw that they wanted strain specific, and it wasn't so much the focus on the potency. They wanted this sativa or this indica, and they wanted to come from this lineage. But then there was a shift, and it all went to potency. And so there was a shift in recreational market that went to the highest potency. So you were cultivating specific lines that you knew grew well, that were reliable, but had maybe a potency range that was a little bit less. Than all of a sudden there was what seemed like an overnight shift. Cannabis moves very quickly, and they were saying, nope, we want potency over 20, over 22, and it's just more and more. So those are the things that are unpredictable. But as we learn more about cannabinoids and terpene profiling and those types of things, you could also see that there's a market that's after that they start to go for that kind of craft cannabis or cannabis connoisseurs that are looking for specific things that are going to help. So that's where I think the industry is looking. A lot of research is being done into that because there's still so much to learn. But the challenges are that I don't think the market completely knows what they want all the time, and that they're changing their mind. And so cannabis is following in suit as quickly as they can.
Right. Okay. Thanks so much. This one's for me, kind of on the research side of things. The plant's been grown for thousands of years, but usually it's listed in most jurisdictions. So I'm just wondering about the gap, or even maybe the agreement between kind of folk knowledge of how to grow this plant and how to get it to high levels of THC or whatever you're looking for, versus the reality of now kind of a systematic approach and industry really growing it. Did those things match up relatively well, or are there big differences between kind of how it was produced and where we're going?
So I think that there's still a lot of there can be a gap between that. So if there's somebody has a license and they're able to grow at home, or they've had experience in doing smaller grows, the conversion between doing that to commercial is big. And understanding that what had happened earlier when you weren't growing for distribution to Canadian market under an LP license following Health Canada, there are things that you cannot do. You have to build an SOP. You have to follow and practice everything you say you're going to do. So what works in a smaller scale plant is not always going to work, or something you can't actually do. That comes into growing techniques and understanding that you have space and capacity, and working in greenhouses versus working in indoor, or that you have to deal with pests and disease that are really difficult to treat, and you can't use whatever is the most effective. It has to be into that compliance. And then again, if you're shipping into medical, there's markets that have a zero spray allowance. So it has to be 100% no foliar applications done whatsoever. So that brings even more hurdles and challenges. So the way of growing, I think that there's still research into different types of growing, and which fertilize recipe is the best to use, and how they're irrigating and lighting, but generally speaking, there's more understanding of that. But the differences between what had happened prior, when people are still trying to link together, is working in that compliance and on a commercial side. So I can speak to growing in 13-acre greenhouses. The place that I was before at Hyde Park was also a 13-acre greenhouse. So this is large scale commercial growing, 30,000 plus tons a year. And so you have to be able to grow on a commercial scale. You have to be able to, and that's different. And sometimes that's challenging, because you have a lot of people that come into the industry and understand cannabis so well and have done so much research and spent time, but are learning to grow on a commercial, and you want the things that you've done on a small scale to work, and sometimes it doesn't. Or you have to also think about cost. So if you're maintaining a small amount of plants, the labor that you need or being able to do that personally is very different from 13 acres.
Right. I'd imagine so. Yeah. A lot of variables there.
A lot.
Soil versus substrate versus Rockwool, and yeah.
And
So that's exciting for me.
too. Yeah, it's very exciting. And it also depends. So like I said, there's cost that goes into it. There's specific growers. So your head grower will potentially have something that they're more knowledgeable and comfortable with. You know, we're growing in Rockwool I've seen both. I've seen cocoa and I've seen soil and I've seen Rockwool, and they have their benefits. So some are a little more forgiving if something happens with irrigation, where others are a little, you know, less forgiving, but also easier to kind of pilot and really hone in on what you're trying to do. And so it's sometimes the comfortability and the experience of that head grower in the greenhouse too, that they're going to grow the best crop with what they are confident and understand too. So research on that end is still happening a lot.
Okay, great, thanks. So I have a question here about generally kind of marketing. I know it sounds like cannabis, you know, has bad press in the past, and there's a question about, you know, is it possible to get a campaign out there to kind of tout the benefits, but does that run afoul of any regulatory issues? Like how much marketing or campaigns for the benefits of cannabis are you allowed to do?
So from that side, in the way of doing a campaign publicly, I am not 100% sure, but I can speak to marketing of product. So which is I use alcohol. Both are controlled substances, both for adult use, but cannabis is highly regulated in a different way from alcohol. So when it comes to, as an example, branding or retail branding on your final product, it has to be white label, black label. You can't use so for vapes, edibles, beverages, things like that, it can't have anything of a flavor that would appear to a youth. So bubble gum or things like that. It has to be very lemon, a little bit more bland. You can't have desirable marketing. So that limits that in that way as well, where alcohol, when you purchase something or a wine bottle and it's got a pretty label and it's got all these appealing things, you can't do that with cannabis right now. It's very, it has to have just a plain label. It has to have all the information that's on it. So it is behind the times in that. I think we'll continue to see a shift, especially as cannabis companies are merging with the alcohol breweries and things like that. So I think, you know, but you have to understand that also comes from Health Canada too. And so as they understand cannabis more, as we're all learning, then we might see a shift, we may not. But when it comes to commercial, like throwing campaigns and doing things like that, I'm not sure 100% from that marketing side where Canada is in that.
Sure, yeah, fair enough. And my understanding is the cannabis regulations will be periodically reviewed and changes can happen. You know, what big change would you like if you could, you know, wave a magic wand? Would it be packaging or something like that?
So I guess kind of links into the last question. So I think packaging is something that would be helpful. I think that it's research should go into that to make sure that we're still following and nobody wants to be appealing to youth and underage users, so we have to be careful there. But I would like to see cannabis looked at in the same from recreational, not medical, it's very different, but from a recreational market is looked at like alcohol is branded the way that alcohol can be and talked about, that it can, you know, it is for adults, it can be used in a safe manner, and understanding that from a recreational market. I think that would allow for more campaigns. I think it would allow for more conversations around it. Like I said, talking with your children. This is an industry I work in, and I am a lot of times right out on the floor in that. So I'm going to go home and I'm going to smell like cannabis that's been harvested all day. And so you have to have those conversations. And for me, that's really important, is being open and honest, because it's something that's in our lives. And as Canadians, it's legal. And so how do we see that shift. And I think we're getting there, and it's pretty exciting how we are. But for me, it's creating that shift to a safe recreational use for adults.
Okay, great. Good. Thanks so much. I think we covered all the questions. Thank you, Jantina. Maybe we'll give you a break too. If there's other questions that come in the next minute, we can try and address those. But otherwise, I'd just like to share that this session today has been recorded and it'll be posted on our BPRC social media websites. We have a Twitter and a LinkedIn. We also have a web page. But if you can't find it that way, please reach out to Martha. Martha, thank you very much for organizing today. She'll be able to steer you in the right direction of where to find this talk. And thank you, Jantina. I think we've done a good session today. Yeah, thanks so much. Very informative. Very nice to know the latest on cannabis and where we're going. Thanks so much for your time. I'm getting lots of comments here right now from the participants saying thank you for your time. Thank you. Awesome talk. So thanks, Jantina.
Well, thank you all. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Great. And thanks for everyone for joining. If there's other questions, please, again, forward them to myself or Martha, and keep an eye out for other upcoming BPRC breakfasts. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care and have a nice day.